Harvard problem. White privilege, microaggressions, and implicit bias have become the key vocabulary in the movement of racial diversity, equity, inclusion, and DEI. Many African Americans have experienced the impact of these concepts on their lives. I am one of them. In 2014, I went to my doctor and I told him that I was having abdominal pain. I told him that I needed some time off of work. He said that he could not help. He sent me to get a colonoscopy instead. And after my colonoscopy, I heard nothing from him. Exactly a year later, in 2015, I went back to that doctor for my yearly checkup. While he began to look at my chart, a nurse walked in and said to him, "They're here." He walked out of the room to see another patient, saying nothing to me. I saw a white female teenager and someone I assumed was her father walk by. I overheard the doctor when he put them in the room next to me. They were laughing and joking. And he said to her, "Oh, it looks like you have a simple rhinovirus." He then came back into my room saying nothing to me again. After he looked at my chart, the expression on his face changed and his jaw dropped. He then said, "I'm looking at your colonoscopy. You must be in pain." I said, "You mean the results from last year?" He said, "Yes. You need to take some medicine. This type of stomach problems can cause a great deal of pain and even a little depression. You should probably take some time off of work." I said, "I'm about to start a new job. I can't take some time off of work." I thought to myself, "You're a year too late." Unfortunately, this experience is not foreign to the Black community. Doctors repeatedly ignore the concerns and complaints of their Black patients. We know that Black pregnant women who have Black doctors have a greater chance of having a successful birth than if they have a white doctor. Babies and mothers die because white doctors ignore their Black patients' needs. See, the problem is the current modern scholarship. The current modern scholarship call this encounter white privilege, microaggressions, and implicit bias. White privilege because he left my room to go and wait on a young white girl who only had the flu. Microaggressions because he neglected to take me seriously a year earlier when I informed him that I was in pain. Implicit bias or blind spot because he did not see my humanity. He would not look at me or address me as a person. I was angry with him, so I found a new doctor. I call this encounter racism and suggest that the use of these three terms diminishes the impact. While white privilege, microaggression, and implicit bias have become the main terminology, these terms are problematic in so many ways. One of these ways is who developed these concepts. Most people believe that the Black Lives Matter movement get the credit, or in so many ways, the blame for creating these concepts. We know this is not the case. These terms were created by individuals who either work or teach or graduated from Harvard University. These terms have become a problem, so much so that I have coined the phrase the Harvard problem. The Black Lives Matter movement has been a great force in helping to bring about the issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and racial justice. But I have become increasingly concerned about some of the issues surrounding the current social justice movement and terminology with which the racial justice concept have been delivered. I have been working in this area of racial justice my entire life. Right now, I have become increasingly concerned that D DEI will be more of a fad and a fleeting concept more than a sustainable lifelong movement. In the year 2020, the world saw tremendous upheaval and change, not just from the coronavirus. A part of that was the death of several African Americans at the hands of police, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others. This rise in the call of social justice and racial equity has worked its way through many levels of society. While Black Lives Matter, DEI, racial equality, and social justice are vital discussions on its face, the racial equality movement is being seized by some in the progressive white elite community. Institutions and corporations are now looking to hire DEI directors. People are holding great conversations about the issues. Many books are being written about the issues. While these things are excellent, the problems are greater. Many white authors receive more attention for their work on the issues of racial justice than Black authors do. At the heart of this appropriation is the Harvard problem. The Harvard problem has been around for many decades, and I believe that these three concepts are harming the idea of Dr. King's beloved community and are creating tremendous resentments in some white people, and therefore pushing the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion backwards instead of forwards. Many people who think of white privilege honestly believe that the idea comes from the Black community. We now know this is not true. The idea of the white privilege comes from and was developed by a white woman who graduated from Harvard and who wanted to help white people understand their racial attitudes and their status in society. I contend that white privilege does not exist. Only privilege does. Not only does it not exist, but teaching it causes more racism than it does in helping to end racism. There are white people who believe that since they've never had privilege, they do not understand what privileges are. They do not know how to use these privileges. Then how can they have these privileges? And how can they be responsible of the problem for these privileges? The other problem with white privilege is white supremacy. Those white people who believe they do have white privilege and they have a birthright to it. When people teach white privilege, they should make sure to teach that it comes from a white woman who graduated from Harvard, not from BLM. The second concept in the Harvard problem is microaggressions, another idea created by a white person who graduated from Harvard. He came up with the concept purely through observation. Microaggressions are indirect, subtle, unintentional acts of discrimination against members of marginalized groups. He made it up. There are several problems with this concept. The term allows for people of every race to misuse and misinterpret a wide variety of situations as racist. To be clear, there are encounters that white people would not consider to be racist, but are racist. For example, when a white person touches a Black person's hair without asking, or maybe even asking. But when that white person who wants to touch that Black person's hair may not understand that they are being aggressive, they are. They may even believe they're being friendly. They don't understand that they're marginalizing that person. Or when a Black person is overlooked while standing in a line for service. Just because a white person is not intentionally being aggressive does not mean that their actions are not racist. Also, not every encounter is aggressive, but it could be racist. And not every difficult encounter between a white person and a person of color is a racial encounter. For example, there are some state laws that are meant for everybody. And when an employee asks you to follow those state laws, even asking a black person to follow them, they're not being racist or discriminatory towards one person. The law may seem to be discriminatory, but the person is not. By calling their actions microaggressions, we are helping them to resist the reality that they are being racist because they have and are stuck on the concepts that they are not being aggressive. It is easy to spot the racists. Just look at all the Karens out there. It is easy to spot the racists because they'll say things like, I'm not racist. I have black friends. I'm not racist. I just think black people and white people should not date or even get married. What's going to happen to the babies? How are they going to fit in? The problem with the term microaggression is that it allows white people to believe that they have done nothing wrong and that they are not racist because they are not aggressive. In reality, if the encounter is racist, they are to blame. The word micro is also a problem. It allows them to think that it's no big deal, and it's not important, and it's not racist. The third concept in the Harvard problem is implicit bias. Implicit bias was developed by two professors who teach at Harvard, neither of them African American, but yep, black people get the blame for it, and even take the responsibility for training people like the police in implicit bias. The problem with implicit bias is it concentrates on the wrong research, and it contradicts research like in the book, Thinking Fast and Slow. This book helps us to understand that everyone has biases, and some of those biases can be good. The problem with using the term implicit bias or unconscious bias is that it becomes another term that avoids calling racism what it is, racism. The implicit or unconscious bias is not the problem. The real problem is that people don't understand what's called anchoring or focalism bias. This is a bias that is rooted in inaccurate and incorrect information that you believe is true. And you will not move away from that truth. And you even try to find information to prove that truth. Anchoring bias helps us to understand that we believe inaccurate stereotypes. We anchor those stereotypes in our lives and in our belief system. And it is difficult for us to move away from those stereotypes. Instead, we find every little piece of evidence to prove stereotypes about race and people. This is the reason why white doctors have a problem with giving pain medicine to black patients, and why black doctors do better with pregnant women. Anchoring bias. They believe that black people have tougher nerve endings. They believe that black people are emotionally stronger than white people, and they find evidence to prove this belief. And because of this, they treat black people medically different than they do white people. This is what happened to me with my doctor. In the same way, this is the myth about black men being criminals, when all the data proves otherwise. The problem with anchoring bias, police and other authorities believe that black men aren't involved with their children, and that black men are dangerous. This is why so many black people get in trouble with the law. This is an implicit bias that some automatically use, and as we have seen, is dangerous to the black community. If we simply say that someone has implicit bias towards black men, we excuse their attitudes and behavior, like they can't help it because they're just acting out of automatic feelings. If a person's bias is anchored in fallacy and lack of truth, and we can try and prove that lack of truth to them and help them change that fallacy, then we can prove that their bias is wrong and can be changed. We can also prove that biases can be good, and people need to find the truth instead of working out of incorrect stereotypes. If people find the truth, they can use their biases for good instead of perpetuating racism. The problem with using the term implicit and unconscious bias is that the term allows for the racist to not realize and know that what they are doing is racist. It avoids even the word racism. Allowing individuals to ignore their actions allows them to continue the process of harming others through their actions. We cannot allow the Harvard problem to continue to confuse and to be inaccurate. When we do, we let excuses stand in the way and let black people die at a greater rate than others. Using the incorrect term can save black people's lives, like mine. I am certain my doctor would swear that he was not racist. But I have to wonder, if I had called him a racist, would he have looked at my results a full year sooner? We cannot let the Harvard problem continue to confuse the issues. It has to stop.